when you watch other truck drivers, talk to other truck drivers, and there's a lot of complaining. I think guys just enjoy complaining. First of all, yeah, I don't know how much of it's legitimate complaints or how much of it's just they just like to complain. Um, here at Crete, they built a state of the art facility in Wilmer, Texas. Do guys still complain? Yes. Brand new facility, state of the art. Couldn't ask for anything more for the drivers. They they still complain. So it doesn't matter how good things are. Drivers are always going to complain. It's just some people just like to complain, and others just are never going to be happy. They're always going to complain. So when you think about driver pay, yes, it could be more. I won't discourage people from wanting more pay, especially with inflation. But it's workable. You can make it work. Now, if you are someone who doesn't have their CDL and you don't have a job, or you're struggling to find a job, when you have nothing, I mean, absolutely nothing, and you get into trucking, you get your CDL, you get into trucking, I think you're going to appreciate, the opportunity more so than others, and who are doing all this complaining? Well, I tell you, it's not the guy who was struggling to find a job. He's not complaining. I mean, he's probably happy. It's the guy who thinks that there's other opportunities that maybe they're wasting their time. Um, if that's the case, then go pursue those other opportunities. If you think you can make more money somewhere else, then by all means, you should do that. But oftentimes they don't go somewhere else. They stay right where they're at, and then they complain. I think in order to be successful in trucking, you got to control your costs. You got to save what money you make, and you got to take that savings and you have to invest it. If you invest it, you'll be fine. You'll do fine. You'll have the money that you wish someday you would have, but it's going to take a little while. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think too often the drivers that complain don't have control over their spending. It's something where they may spend $20 or more per day on the road. Just eating fast food at the truck stops. It's not uncommon if you buy chicken fingers and pizza and McDonald's and Burger King. All this stuff is going to be $10 to $20. You're like, all I got was a hamburger, fries, and a Coke. But you do that a couple times a day, and you're over $20 for the day. So you know, could you make more? Yes. Could you spend less? Yes, you could spend less. And can you save more? Yes, you can save more. But you think about appreciating what you have. Um, even when I first started driving truck 10 years ago, I have more today than I had 10 years ago. Uh, it used to be, I'll give you an example with just technology. And 10 years ago, I had one of these little mobile Wi-Fi hotspot devices. Okay, it was a little square thing you got at Walmart, and it came with like 50 gigabytes Wi-Fi hotspot, and I used that to hook up the laptop, and you could do all your internet stuff through that mobile hotspot. Well, over the years, the cell phones got better, and now I have a more expensive cell phone. It comes with a mobile hotspot, and I no longer use that little square device. And I think about stuff like that. And it's like, it's so much better now than it was 10 years ago. Even the electronic log devices are better now than they were 10 years ago. Dash cameras are better. GPS units are better. Sirius XM satellite radio in your truck. Previous generations did not have all these benefits of this technology. and they did just fine. They grinded it out day in and day out. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have GPS, electronic logs, or satellite radio. So our ancestors in many ways were much tougher than drivers are today. They didn't have uh, you know uh, bunks with uh, air conditioning all night and heat all night. They would have to run their truck if they wanted to do that. They didn't have APUs. you know you'd see some of these truck stops had the old uh, purchase air conditioning. I've used this before when I first started driving truck. You put the unit in your window. It's like this big hose. And you would pay for it, and it would give you internet access. It would give you electrical. It would give you air conditioning. Well, you don't have to do that nowadays. So drivers complaining nowadays is like, what do you have to complain about? Compared to previous generations, you got it made. You absolutely have it made. You have more truck stops available now, better truck stops. Do you think Love's truck stops were around, 30 years ago? I think the Love truck stops are probably the best truck stops, the cleanest showers, the great parking. I wish there were more Love truck stops. And there's new truck stops being developed all the time. Could things be better? Yes, they could be better. They could always be better. But you got to put things in perspective, okay? It's like if your father or your grandfather drove a truck, they didn't have it as good as you do today. They didn't have all the modern conveniences, and they had to work every single day without all that stuff. So yes, it's okay to complain about the wages because it's inflationary. The prices of everything, and wages don't seem to be catching up with it. But you also have to put things in perspective. You probably are living much higher standard of living as a truck driver today than previous generations. You know, uh, it is tough. I'm not saying it's not tough or it's not hard work. It definitely is. But, when you compare it to other generations that came before you, you got so much more conveniences, so much more things about trucking, that they would have loved to have had. Even when I first came to Crete in 2014, and I was here in Wilmer, Texas, the facility wasn't that great, and I had to park my personal vehicle in a grassy field. I'm like, this sucks. And then over the years, they expanded it, and they've got more gravel and stuff like this. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's better, And then they just, eventually put down fresh concrete, the whole place. Is it better? Absolutely. I would have been tickled to death 10 years ago to come to the Wilmer terminal and have a great facility like this. But it was kind of crappy when I first started. But it's great now. Now it's really, really nice. So these are things you got to keep in mind. There's plenty of things to complain about, but by comparison to previous generations, you got it made. You absolutely got it made. So keep that in mind. The guy who started out with nothing is going to appreciate everything he has in trucking. It's the guy who thinks he could do better somewhere else and he's wasting his time. He's probably complaining the most. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.